It is 2 o'clock, so I will go ahead and call this work session to order. I just want to note for the record that there is a quorum of the Gilliam County Court present, and I'd like to go around the room and on the Zoom if we can, and I think we need to do continue on there. So folks know we also have the Zoom going, so there's folks who are online, there are folks who are here in the courtroom, for those who are on Zoom. The owl, which is this thing that's sitting in the middle right here, is a camera. So don't be alarmed if it's swiveling as you talk. It'll pick you up and show you on the screen. So welcome to technology. So with that, let's start with introductions, and maybe I'll just start with me and go this direction. I'm Liz Farrar-Campbell. I'm the county judge here at Gilliam County.
Sherry Wilkins, County Commissioner. Catherine Griner, City of Condon Administrator.
Pat Shannon, County Commissioner.
Lisa Atkin, Gilliam County Chief of Staff.
Derek Kaiser, City and County Commissioner, I guess.
Planning
Commissioner. Yeah, excuse me.
Teresa Aldrich.
Nathan, you want to start?
Nathan Hammer, Gilliam County Treasurer and Director of Finance.
Max Pitchfield, Pioneer PCDC.
Stephen Allen, County Journal.
Linda Smith, Kathleen from the State. Jackie Hardy, Condon resident.
I'm a contract planner for the City of Condon and some other small cities in the area.
Amy Coy, Coy Real Estate.
Okay, and then on Zoom, for folks who are dialing in, just so you know, it's *6 to unmute yourself. If you're new to the Zoom platform as well, the unmute is in your lower left-hand side. And let's start. It looks like we have Julius. Julius, you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, I'm here.
Julius Courtney, you're on the PCDC board, correct? Okay. Kaylin.
Hey everyone, Caitlin Lane, Executive Director, Chamber of Commerce, proudly serving Gilliam, Sherman, and Wheeler counties.
Rob.
Rob Turry, Pioneer Community Development Executive Director. And I would just like to say I had certainly planned to be there with you today, but I'm under the weather and don't belong in a room full of people.
Fair. Paul Conway. You're unmuted, Paul. Go ahead. Oop.
Paul Conway, Veteran Service Officer, Gilliam, Sherman, and Wheeler counties. I'm in the Morrow office today of Sherman County.
Great. Jeff? I can't hear you, Jeff. I think your microphone might be not coming through. Technical difficulties. He said 1 minute. We'll come back to you. Michelle.
I think he's in cold.
Michelle Gear, Condon School District.
Okay, let me see who else we got. Pat, Smart Board. Teddy.
Hi, this is Teddy Fennern, and I work for Gilliam County Family Services.
Catherine, Sherry, Nate. Nate, are you with us?
Hey, this is, I am. Hey, it's Nate Seiss. I'm Governor Brown's Regional Solutions Coordinator for, that covers Gilliam County, and I am going to be by phone for a hot second. I'm just getting done volunteering at the vaccine clinic here in the Dalles, and I'm headed back to Zoom land.
See you soon. Gib. You there, Gib? We'll give him a second to unmute. For the record, Gib Wilkins is on here as well. And I think Leah.
Leah Shannon, Waste Management.
Awesome. And then Jeff, is your mic working?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Can.
Okay. Yeah, this is Jeff Schott, and I'm representing Pioneer Community Development.
Okay, let me make sure that I did not miss anybody. Did I get everybody?
I think so.
Okay. All right. So here's kind of, well, first, what we always start out our meetings with public comment. And I will just say, my anticipation is that because this is a work session, that this be pretty freewheeling. So rather than actually have a public comment period, I'm just putting on the record that as we kind of move through the discussion, everyone who's signing in, whether you're a member of the public or officially representing somebody, I think we would welcome ideas, feedback on how to move forward on some of these initiatives and projects. So rather than do a formal public comment, I'm just going to put that out that the whole meeting, I'm hoping that we have that kind of engagement. So here's what I'm anticipating. Let's see, we have a few more people signing on actually. It looks like we have maybe Rachel signing on.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself really quick? She might just be listening too. And then we also have Kim Travis with us. Kim, do you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Good afternoon. I'm Kim Travis with Oregon Housing and Community Services.
Great. Yeah, and we're having more and more people sign in. So while people are signing in, I'll sort of give an overview of what I'm hoping we can talk about today, and then we'll just run with it. So originally we called this meeting because the PCDC folks had reached out and wanted to look at the incentive programs that the county is funding and explore sort of how those are working, and if there needs to be some adjustments, what those would look like. And then literally that afternoon, Catherine walked into my office and said, hey, the city has some projects that they're wanting to work on related to housing. And I was like, oh, well, PCDC just reached out. So why don't we have a community discussion about what everybody's doing and see if there are synergies in places that we can work together. And so the agenda is sort of laying out, starting with PCDC's original request, which is looking at how those incentives are working, whether there needs to be tweaks. And then I am hoping Catherine has put together a PowerPoint to kind of walk through what we're seeing in some housing trends, and then talk through some of the stuff that the city has been working on. I know that like Amy's a partner and is sitting there, so she can add to that as well. And then I'm hoping that we can kind of not have this just be a conversation, that we're actually walking away from the table with who is doing what next, so that we are getting some momentum behind actually addressing housing. So that is my intention for the meeting, and what I'm hoping to get out of it. So the other people who have joined, just for the record, Nicole Schott, do you want to introduce yourself? Maybe.
Yeah, figuring it out. Nicole Schott, and I'm here from the Condon School Board.
Perfect. And then I also see we have an Ariel Nelson as well.
Everyone, I'm Ariel Nelson. I'm a part of the lobby team with the League of Oregon Cities, and been talking to Catherine a little bit and Condon through some other meetings about housing needs, and happy to be here as a resource and learn about what Condon might be considering.
Great. So with that, and as folks jump on, we'll try to let people know who else is joining us. I think I want to just toss it over to Rob as a starting point. And Rob, I don't know if you want to sort of kick us off with where you guys are in terms of how the current incentive programs are being utilized, sort of what's in the queue that you know of, and anything that you guys have discussed as a board in terms of if there are tweaks or things that you are looking at that may need us to revisit the MOU regarding the incentive funds. I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. First, I would like to just go back and review the programs that the county has funded. Just for a refresher, we have 3 separate loan programs available to incentivize builders and developers to build new single and multifamily housing. Single family is, we are now currently up to $225,000 limit on that. And we are at 338,000 on multifamily. We originally started out considerably lower than that and have had to move higher with the material costs and just really strong demand as well, I think, which is a great thing. The other construction program that we have is called a rehab construction loan, which would be if you own a non-owner occupied building and would like to turn that possibly into a rental property, or you could also sell it as a new property. Those are up to $50,000 at 3%, maximum $50,000. We also have several grant programs which have been particularly popular. Number one being a 5-year agreement for someone to take a property that was previously not a rental property and agree to turn that into a long-term rental property for a minimum of 5 years. And that provides them with a $10,000 grant, excuse me, per unit. So if you had a duplex, could be as much as 20,000. And that grant also applies to new construction. So not only could you use the construction loan for a multifamily, you could also take advantage of the $10,000 grant per unit up to 4 units, which is, a really nice way to help fund part of your project. We also have a grant program that relates to demolishing derelict properties or abating things like asbestos, those types of things that might come up during a demolition. If you demolish a property and you need to extend utilities to the property where you're going to build something new on it, that same grant also applies, and those grants are up to a maximum of $10,000. Hang on here. And then the last grant that we have is similar to the rehabilitation construction loan. This is a rehabilitation grant, which would provide you 20% of eligible expenses up to a maximum of $50,000. So let's say you don't need a construction loan, but you have an empty building that needs a lot of rehab to it to be able to put it on the market. We would basically fund you through the reconstruction rehab aspect of it. We do also, one thing that's very important as far as the demo grant, which I left out, is it also applies to removal of mobile homes, single family mobile homes. And that's only up to, that's a $2,500 grant versus the $10,000 grant. As far as what we've done so far, grant-wise, we put out six rehab grants, which all went to turning an empty house into a new rental, which is exactly what we want to do. And out of those six rehabs, we ended up with 9 new rental properties. Obviously, 3 didn't need the rehab. These were all properties that were not rentals previously. And so we had 9 people that applied for the 5-year agreement, which added, clearly a lot of inventory to Condon. Those are all in Condon. It's a little different story as far as the age of housing in Arlington versus Condon. And you'll see that by, excuse me, we've also done 3 demo grants here in Condon. And one thing I'd like to point out, and this is brought to my attention by one of our builders, and it makes a ton of sense, was that we would see a lot more people looking to demo property and turn it into a new lot for building if the county was not assessing some of these derelict buildings at say $30,000. Because what the builders are saying, that's, you know, if I was to buy that property, there's my profit. You know, and that's what's preventing, I think, some people from selling or wanting to sell their lots, is that they have this sense that there's, you know, some value there. When in reality, you have a derelict property that's not livable. There's really no value there. It's expense that would be required to take it down. And by offering the demolition grants, we're trying to help you do that. But from a builder standpoint, they'd be much more likely to come in, buy a lot, build spec houses or rentals or whatever, if the assessments on some of these derelict properties were, in their mind, a little more realistic. As far as loans go, we've now built 4 new houses in single-family houses in Arlington with our construction loan program. One of those being a rental property, a new rental property. The other 3 all single-family. That's been really nice and successful. And I think what we've discovered and what we wanted to do in the first place was show that the building can be done in those areas. And there has been a ton of new construction going on up on Columbia Heights or Columbia View Manor or Columbia View Heights, whatever it's called. Anyway, we want to encourage the market to do these things. So a lot of new houses are being built up there without coming to us for using our loan programs or grant programs. They're doing it on their own, which is, again, what we're trying to encourage. We just finished, actually just got the certificate of occupancy today on the last one that we're doing. As far as what's in the pipeline, we've got a new spec house that's looking to be built in Condon, which would be the first one in Condon that we built that was new. We're looking forward to getting that going. They had planned to start this year, but I know it's getting a little late, so I'm not sure they're going to be able to do anything until next spring. And as far as what the board and I are looking at, we've been approached, and Catherine can go into bigger detail about possibly doing a project here in Condon that would provide anywhere from 12 to 20 new rental units up at the golf course. And it would be a situation where Pioneer and/or an LLC that would be created would build the project along with a development company. And we've kind of just made at this point, the agreement that we're open to looking at that. And that's about as far as we are right now.
I'll start with commissioners. Any questions for Rob initially?
No,
I don't have any at this point.
Amy, did you have something?
there's a lot more going on in Condon than there is in Arlington.
Yeah, Amy, did you want to add
Yeah,
something?
so I have a couple questions for Rob. On the loan programs, Rob, are those just for rental properties, or if someone, for example, wanted to build and live in that home, can they also borrow to construct a new home?
The builder could, yes. Or I guess the individual could too, as long as they had a contract with a builder. But no, it's not. Those are not limited to rentals at all.
And you mentioned 3%. What are the full terms for the repayment on those loans?
You're going to have a hard time finding anything even close to what we can offer. For some reason, I'm having trouble with my video staying on, so bear with me. Our terms are there are no commitment fees. There's no commission involved. We charge 3% interest only during the life of the construction project, and then at the end of the project, we get paid back through a term loan that the borrower has pre-qualified for with their mortgage lender.
Okay, a couple more questions. On the grants for reimbursement for repairs at I think it was 20%, is it that reimbursement is required to be completed by a contractor? Is that right?
Yes, it would have to be by a licensed contractor. That said, if you did work yourself, materials would be eligible. So let's say, paint, whatever you might buy that doesn't require, licensed contractor. Those would also qualify, but anything related to electrical, plumbing, typical things that a contractor would do has to be through a licensed contractor.
Okay, and then the last question is related to on the demolition grant. You had meant we had a previous conversation about utilities, and during this conversation you mentioned like for that grant money would be in a case where there's a removal of a demolition, and then they can extend utilities in there for rebuilding. But you had mentioned, for example, on the development of the baseball field for grant money for example, putting in electrical lines. Can you expand on that?
Sure. As far as extending utilities combined with the demolition, the maximum grant is still $10,000 total. As far as the baseball field type situation, that would also apply, but obviously probably wouldn't need $10,000 to extend utilities from the street to the house.
Would that include internet? So for example, let's say a builder, they buy a lot, they're building their home, and so they apply for the grant to install the electrical lines and internet. Would that include both of those? That would fall in that category?
It's not currently in our program, but we certainly could look at, possibly doing that. It's certainly these days, internet is would be considered a must-have utility.
So Rob, I have a question. I think the last time you came and saw the court with building materials going up, there had been sort of a lull, maybe an interest from some of the contractors. Now that those costs are starting to go back down a little bit, is the interest picking up, or are we still kind of in that lull period where people have kind of shelved building plans for now?
Well, I think the lull also had a whole lot to do with the pandemic because there was just so much uncertainty at that particular point. We have seen a ramp up in interest. For example, one of the lots we demoed here in Condon over on North Potter now has a brand new 3-bedroom, 2-bath manufactured home on it. I've been contacted by the owner of the lot that's across from Soil and Water on Ward Street. I think it's 2 lots on the corner there. He is now ready to do something, probably not till next spring. But I think that we'll see a pickup next spring, assuming that inflation in general doesn't cause interest rates to go up too much. But I think we're definitely back in a higher interest period.
And then the other question I had, because I'm curious I understand the grant programs have been popular, so I'm curious how much of that original investment PCDC still has or is circulating, even if it's out, but you're expecting it to come back.
Yeah, I can tell you that. Currently, and this is kind of the beauty of doing construction loans, because you get your money, you get paid back. Grant wise, we have issued grants plus administration. We have used $184,431. We currently have $301,706 out in outstanding loans, although 225 of that is coming back to us later this month as one of our construction loans closes. So we actually have over $1 million of the $1,250,000 still available.
Great. Any additional questions for Rob, at least at this point, on what's currently out there? Anybody online have questions? If not, I'd like to, transition over to Catherine and have you walk us through sort of where the city is in terms of, I think, both the baseball field and then also the golf course developments. So I'll turn it over to you, and I think you have
I have
PowerPoint.
And I haven't done PowerPoint in quite some time, so this is very basic.
Teresa's getting it loaded.
I think it's working.
So I want to thank Gilliam County to schedule this meeting to discuss the housing needs of not only the city of Condon, but all of Gilliam County. What we're working for is called affordable workforce employee housing. In the past 5 years, we've seen a migration to rural Oregon from populated areas where they can no longer afford to build or rent. A lot of what we're seeing through our utilities is we're getting people from Central Oregon, specifically Prineville. I think in the last year, we've had 3 people move from Prineville. Hermiston, Portland, not so much the Columbia Gorge yet. But what we're finding is a lot of people can sell their house in those areas, pay off their loans, and have enough money from what they get their house for to buy a place here with either no loan or very little bit of a loan. Also with COVID, we see another uptick of people coming to Condon due to the schools being open, and their kids can go to school out here. And also with COVID, we see that a lot of people can remote work. And we saw some of that before the pandemic. We're seeing a lot more of it now. So with that becomes, we have a lot more people looking for housing in Condon. So we know we have a shortage of rentals and we have a shortage of houses on the market. As in the populated areas, it's become harder to afford to live where you work. The city of Condon wants to protect our workforce by building quality, affordable rentals in some fashion tied to the employers. So what we're trying to do, and we'll get to it after I give you kind of a summary of what's going on, is make sure that our workforce has a comfortable place to live, that they can afford to live where they work. So on this slide, I just wanted to kind of give you a summary of what we see in Condon. So this was put together with me and the Public Works, taking our active houses and what we have. So we have, and we took out all the commercial, we took out all the vacant lots that have meters. So, and I just had my Public Works go over all of it. And so we have 262 owner-occupied homes. We have 24 second or absentee owner homes, such as people coming back and they have, or they may work somewhere else, or they have ties to the community that can't have back here. We believe there's 81 rentals here. That does not include the apartments or the duplex in here that we have. We have one apartment. Also too, Summit Springs is not in this equation at all. Our Public Works just went through a rough thing of how many vacant lots with water meters. We think we have 20 lots right now that have water meters to them that are vacant. And then we also have 8 vacant houses that have water meters to them. The problem we're finding with those vacant lots with water meters in those vacant houses is people don't want to give them up. They don't want to sell them. They want their elbow room. They want their space. So that's what we came to when we decided to, which is the next slide. Also, I want to give you kind of a housing summary. And I gave this to Linda Smith the other day. And anyone that wants this information, I can send it to them. But what we did was I went off Zillow for the last 3 years of all the homes sold just in the city of Condon. I didn't do vacant lots. I didn't do the airbase. I didn't do anything outside of our city limits. And as you can see, in 2019, we had 18 homes sold. That's when things started really ramping up. Obviously, 2020, the pandemic hit us. Things slowed down immensely. And then in 2021, we've already got up to 12 homes sold. And I think Linda can attest to this, is that every time there's a house that comes up, it's sold almost immediately. And what we've also seen is a lot of the homes that have been picked up in 2019 on up have been from investors that have turned them into rentals or have done a flip. One of the things that we did see in 2020, and the flipper is here, is we saw Jackie and Larry purchased a house in 2020 for $100,000, and it sold in the next year plus for almost $160,000. So we see the increase in home prices as we go up, coming up, and the demand for more houses. So the next slide, I just wanted to we had some confusion from some of our residents that thinking that we hadn't been working on housing very long. So what I wanted to do is just go back. In 2018, we started to work with Tennyson Engineering on designing the Fairway Housing Project, which we're going to talk about where workforce housing is going to go. Tennyson did 5 different designs of what the lots would look like, ranging from 21 to 28 lots up there, all along the golf course, in different designs, up to $40,000 and $50,000 it would cost as per lot just to get the utilities to these lots. That didn't include the utilities to the subdivision up there. We came to a discussion with Pioneer CDC in January, I believe, of 2019. And while we were there, Judge Campbell was there, and we got to discussing that the school was ready to give away, they had just passed their bond, I believe. They wanted someone to take on the grade school building. And what the cities, after that meeting, we got to thinking that before we invested millions of dollars into the Fairway Housing Project, we wanted to see if this housing is as in need as what we thought it was, as what we were seeing at the city as the influx of residents through the utilities. We wanted to see how Port was. So we got into a discussion in 2019 with the school that said, we'll take on your old grade school building, the city of Condon will, but we want your baseball field and we want it now because we want to turn it into housing. We think that the water was there, the sewer was there, 3 streets were there, all we needed was 1 street. So right after we met with Pioneer CDC in January, the 1st of February, we had a council retreat, and I threw it at him and I said, I hate to change plans on you guys. What would you think about taking on the grade school and putting the housing there and putting Fairway Housing on hold? And they graciously listened and thought about it and decided that was a good idea to see if the need was there. So in 2019, we started working with the school. We closed the deal in 2020. We started working on our engineering for it. We started working through the planning process. Partway in 2020, we started the hearings in 2021 to divide them up. While this was happening, we have made a deal. The council felt strongly about us not being in the real estate business, and we wanted to go out for a developer. So we went out for a developer in the end of 2020, I believe it was, and it was awarded in 2021 to Amy Coy Real Estate. And basically, we sold the lot saying, we will get the utilities there because we can get the grants to get the utilities there. We knew that if she could build houses on those lots within the next couple years, we would, in the next 15 years, get back our investment in it. Our investment is, we got a grant for $175,000 from Gilliam County. We thought it was going to be about $326,000. With the cost of things, it's ending up being about $400,000. It's done other than the street right now. We're doing the final planning with Kirk Fatlin, and we should have it all wrapped up, and the property will be turned over to Amy Coy December 1st. And she can start selling as soon as she's ready. So I think we can go over to the next one.
Before we jump to that, I wonder, I don't want to mess up your flow, but I'm curious for Amy, have you started marketing those? Are you finding that there's the demand that the city thought there would be for that?
Right, yes. And so just to kind of do a recap, as Catherine had mentioned, December 1st, title is expected to close, escrow is expected to close. And, we're working, I get calls from Linda. We have about 3 very interested parties for sure. And there's been a couple of other parties that are interested. Nothing's been signed yet, but the current plan is once Coy Real Estate owns the property, we will install the sidewalks on Jefferson Street and on the new McKinley Street. So those 2 streets will have sidewalks. I was considering adding in internal fencing, but the thing I have to look at if I'm going to be doing that would be whether or not there's enough room for construction, right? So I don't know that I can actually do that. And I've kind of getting some feedback from the builders to see whether or not, you had that fence line in between. But I thought that would be a nice enhancement to those properties to have a nice property separation. So, so in the next few weeks, we'll be starting up with reaching back out to these individuals and starting the process of contracts and looking at pricing. I have not made any final decisions yet. I've got a lot of questions on how much will they be sold for. I believe that the corner lots will most likely go for just a slightly higher to in middle lots. And it depends on what our pricing is as well with installing the sidewalks and all of that. So that's kind of where we're at that point.
So to go back here too, one thing I didn't mention in mine is that when we sold this to the developer, the city put some restrictions on the deed. One of the main restrictions is that they have to be stick-built homes. It cannot be manufactured homes. They also have to be built within 2 years from the time she signs. So as of December 1st, the clock starts. So there's up to 2 years to build houses on these with 3 one-year extensions. So there's a total of 5 years that all 6 of those lots have to have homes on them. If she sells a lot and there's no home on them by the end of the 5th year, that lot reverts back to the city at absolutely no charge. We do not buy the lot back. It comes back to us. And so what we're trying to do once again is to have quality housing to make sure it looks a lot like the neighborhood that it's already set up in. And to make sure that these are going to cover the 3-bed, 2-bath homes that people are looking for. It's not going to be the workforce housing that we desperately need on another level. So that's where that project is. All the infrastructure is in right now. I think we're waiting on the electricity to be put in. All the water and sewer pipes are there, charged, and going to be ready to go.
Great.
The meters are in. So then,
That's
I don't know
exciting.
if anyone else has questions about the baseball field. One other thing too I need to say is there is from the homes on Bryan Street, which are to the east, there's quite a buffer. The city only developed the block. There's also another half block that's undeveloped, and we're hoping to work with the neighborhood at some point to figure out if that's going to be a green space, such as just a meandering path, something low maintenance. That
So
we
like
don't have
between
to-
Barnett's
Well,
and,
that's between them. Okay.
So between Barnett's back fence, there's a 12-foot alley that no one's ever used. Then there's a 100-foot half a block, and then there's a 60-foot road. So there's 172 feet between their back fence and even where the property lines start for the new property.
So you described those houses as 3-bedroom, 2-bath.
Well,
So could describe for me what affordable work employee housing.
we're getting there. Coming there.
so before we transition into that, we had Jeremy join us. Jeremy, do you just want to introduce yourself briefly, who you are and who you're representing?
Jeremy, the city council, and also on the housing subcommittee.
And then I also wanted to know, because 2 other folks who are potential partners in here, I see that Superintendent Hammond is on from the Arlington School District. Hey, Brandon. And then Kathleen Cathy from Senator Wyden's office is on as well. I just wanted to note that. So anyway, proceed, Catherine.
Also too, on those lots, there can be multifamily housing. They just have to be stick-built. There can be, the way the lot sizes are, they can have up to a 4-plex on those. There's no restriction on that type of housing over there also. So next one. So it's percolating along, and we thought, we need to start looking about what we want to do with, we're calling it the Fairway Housing, but it might go into, we're thinking this should be the Nobel laureate housing project at some point. And our streets will be Murphy and Pollen, but we haven't got that far. So we got to thinking about as trying to figure out how to get ahead of the curve on what a lot of these other towns that all of a sudden are getting influx from larger populated, more expensive areas. How are we going to protect people that want to come teach school here, can't find housing, people that want to work on Main Street? Jeremy's been a great resource because he owns a business or is going to be owning a business on Main Street, how he's going to keep his employees. Also too is I've had a conversation briefly with Leah Shannon at Waste Management about how many units they would need. We got put together with a contractor in that has just finished up a project in Hines, Oregon. They did 20 units. They rent them for $570 for a 1-bedroom unit, up to $680 for a 2-bedroom unit. Brand new. They are tied to some low to moderate income requirements due to where they got their funding. So, but I wanted to show you the project area first. So we have a little over 9 acres at the Fairway Housing Project. Right now, with the contract that we did to put the utilities at the baseball field, that contract, we also signed a contract to get utilities to the property line of our subdivision with this contract. So they're up there right now digging across the golf course, putting in a sewer line, and then they'll put a water line. They'll upgrade the water line. There's a 12-inch water line that goes through the golf course right now that they're going to connect into, and put 16-inch water line down Cottonwood Road. And then that will supply all of the subdivision, whatever we decide to put into it. And I guess I should bring it back to the city of Condon. Our wastewater and our water system is set up to, our wastewater in particular, is set up to accommodate 1,200 residents. So we still have plenty of room. We're at 700 though. I was trying to find what our new census is. I found the county. I can't find the city of Condon. So if anyone knows what that is, I'd be curious, because I think we've gone up some. So it's going to be up in this area. And then I don't know if I have, let's see what the next one is.
The structure.
Yeah. So what we're looking in phase 1 is affordable workforce housing. So we first thought it should possibly be apartments. And then we thought it possibly should not be apartments because maybe they need to be 4-plexes, because if they're 4-plexes, we don't have to change our code at this point. If we don't have apartments in our city of Condon code. So we are thinking of putting a 4-plex per lot. And then at some point, whoever owns this doesn't want to own it anymore. They can then sell them off as 1 4-plex and maybe not the whole unit. So talking to a developer for affordable housing, that did the Hines project, they mentioned that you want to make sure that you have a nonprofit be the owner of this, because if the city remains the owner of this affordable housing, we're going to have a lot of BOLI, we're going to have a lot of contracting requirements that apply to cities and counties, governmental units, that does not apply. So we approach Pioneer CDC, and I see 2 members, and I know there's Jeff is on and Julius is on also to answer any questions. So we approached them to say, would you take on this project? And possibly the city of Condon could help make sure we got the infrastructure and the street in, and then get the rest of the funding from the county. We can go out and we can leverage funding, but I'm hoping that we can build this within Pioneer CDC, Condon, and Gilliam County funds, for the fact that we won't be bound by a lot of requirements if we went out and got outside funding. And it's not just the requirements of a grant, it's the requirements of who you're going to rent to once you get that grant. I think Matt can attest to that at Summit Springs, though that's when they got their money to build Summit Springs, there's so many home units that have to be rented, just different people. And we're not trying to say we don't want to be a place for a lower income person to be, but our first goal is to make sure that we take care of our employees. Phase 2 of the Fairway Housing, we're not quite sure what the remaining acreage is going to look like. We've discussed about some multi-use mixed housing of larger lots towards the face of the golf course with smaller lots to the back, but we're working with Kirk Batlin on some of what we are trying to do there. And we also really want to make sure that with this one, where we thought we had community input by just having our public meetings, this we want to try and do some more outreach to make sure that we meet the employers and the community members to make sure that everyone's on board with this project on both sides of this Fairway Housing. I think the next, so I just wanted to give you a couple similar projects. And this is actually a picture of the project in Hines. They've already filled them. There's 20 units and they filled them. Granted, Hines is slightly bigger than us and they're connected to Burns. The city's not spooked of 20 units. I think after seeing the influx of people and on Main Street, I think those units can be filled with people that need to live there, not need to, that can live there and have a nice home and be affordable to them and not take up their whole paycheck. I just put the others down. I know LeGrand has one that they had someone. So the one person we've dealt with is First Development Partners. They're out of Portland, but they've done Hines. They're doing another one in Burns for homeless veterans in this next phase. And they're also doing a one in Ontario, 104 unit project.
Before you move on, Kathy, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm kind of going off on a side note, Catherine. You were talking about not being, first of all, I love this picture from Hines. That is just, I mean, I would love to live in one of those cute houses. But you talked about not being zoned for apartments. Do you have some ideas in terms of like future zoning and whether or not you might be interested in like apartments and also tiny houses? Tiny houses seem to be like a thing anymore, especially for veterans.
We have our planner here that he might be able to address that because we are going through our code right now. It's not out of the realm that apartments would be put in, but I'm going to let Kirk address that because he can do it much more eloquently than I.
We'll see. Yeah, so sort of the idea right now is we're allowing or working to allow with the planning commission duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes on any residential lot, regardless of size, just if it meets the setbacks. Who cares how many units are there? We're looking at duplexes through fourplexes being attached, like you typically picture, or detached. So you can end up with something that looks like what people are referring to as cottage clusters, up to 4 units. What we've kind of determined is 5 units or more apartments are kind of a big leap in the residential zone from a single family home. So thinking about this incrementally, just going up a couple stages makes more sense. I think considering it in the commercial zone would make sense. We'll see if they want to go that route, but yeah, mostly looking at that. I think tiny houses, from what I've seen in other places, you can build a tiny house in Condon if you want. If you want to build a very small house, you can do that. It seems to be something that, you know, is not really that desirable to live in a very small place, as cute as it is on Instagram. I think you can do that right now. And if we allow 4 units on a lot, if you put 4 of those on a 5,000 square foot lot, they're going to be pretty small. So you can do that, but we're not going to make specific provisions as far as that for tiny houses, if that helps.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, Kathleen, is that those tiny houses actually come in on wheels and they're basically heavier, bigger trailers. I mean, they're still mobile. So yeah, Kirk is right. You can build a small house as long as you meet the setbacks. And we can call it a tiny house, but.
Okay. No, I was just wondering because that's something that some of the folks have been talking about across Eastern Oregon. And so I was just wondering if you guys were going to open up your discussion on planning to include that. But it sounds, if you can do 4 units on a lot, I don't know why you would need that. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for taking time to listen. Answer my question.
Yeah. So the other thing too is, and speaking of tiny houses, I think there is actually a tiny house for veterans development. And I thought it was in LeGrand, but I'm not sure. Maybe I can't remember where it's at, but there is one already.
Yeah, it's in my neighborhood.
Okay.
It's in my neighborhood. In fact, there was kind of a blighted, you turn the corner and there's this kind of blighted area. And so the Veterans Village is a huge upgrade. It's a big win-win. We're pretty excited about it.
So one other thing I want to mention too is even though there's been substantial investment in affordable housing in the state of Oregon in the last couple of years, as we're talking about for veterans, this is a unique thing that we have yet to find, that we're pairing employers with housing. And we haven't figured out yet how to do it. And we're still investigating how to make that happen, to make sure the employers in Condon and in Gilliam County have a place for their employees over someone that might move in just because the rent is lower. So we haven't figured that out. If you find someone that does, let us know.
Yeah, so just to kind of share, I am building 2 duplexes, so 4 units in Grass Valley. And it's just 2 blocks from the GVB plant, the bio plant, basically, that bought the grade school. And they are expected to be completed in December, possibly 2 of the units in January, but they're already rented. And the employer is actually going to be having a master lease. So this is to give you an example. For example, the school or, if a couple of employers, maybe Waste Management, would like to reserve those units to always have them available for their employees and not lose that opportunity. So I've been working with their attorneys to have a master lease. They will guarantee the lease payments, but the actual direct lease will be with their employee. And they're using that also as part of their negotiating and hiring new top engineers and employees in that way. So that's an example that you might be able to go as far as, these.
And I think that's a great, I'm glad, and we'll talk later about that too. Because one of the other things is Jefferson County got some money from the housing department a couple years ago, but they own it. Mm-hmm. So they own it and can directly lease them to their employees. And we don't see that as necessarily the biggest option, to have like Summit Springs own 3 units and someone else own 3. They can't really afford it. But one of the things we did talk about with Jeremy, and I did talk about it with Pat, was possibly if the employers, if we set the deposits to get into the units at a little higher rate, like $1,000 or $1,500, that the employers pay the deposit to get them in on the lease. And then that would be a way of somewhat too that they could.
Not even any different than a hiring bonus.
Right. Yeah, to at least get them housing. So we're still working through on something like that. And I mean, this is the city talking, but if we hand the reins off to Pioneer CDC, I'm hoping they will still partake and let the city partake in these discussions. But we'll see how that works. I mean, we've got to see how we'll all work together. But I think some of the next steps for us is we need to determine who the administrator, the owner of the project is going to be, and what are our potential funding options. Again, I would rather keep the funding in county if possible. So we can, obviously we have to go by fair housing, but we can basically call the shots of how this housing unit is going to be completed. We need to meet with the employers of Gilliam County through the chamber, through just having a community gathering to see what is the potential they think we need. We also, I think the next thing is to do an RFP to secure a developer that specializes in affordable housing. The one in Hines, and granted it was right before the pandemic, they built 20 units for $3 million. I'm guessing that they got the land from the county. I'm guessing that does not include the infrastructure, but that is $150,000 a unit to rent. And to have it debt-free will have the rents be able to pay for the administration, the taxes, and the maintenance of the facility. Another thing too is whether Pioneer wants to move forward and be this and to secure an RFP for a developer, it would be really nice to start with one is to figure out let's get a preliminary design and preliminary costs. What can they do on, how many acres do they need? The one in Hines is 7 acres. I did talk to the developer. They said, we don't think we're going to need 7 acres to do something as similar. And then also too, a part of this, I would like to see a community plan to figure out how we're going to involve the community and keep them interactive in the process. So everyone is in this together instead of having, I guess, making sure it goes smoothly if we have everyone in the whole way. So that my last thing is just questions. I don't know if anyone else had any other questions about what's going on with the housing in the city of Condon.
Yeah, so first thing I just want to note for the record is that Catherine's PowerPoint will include as part of the court packet online. So for anybody who wanted to see those stats, we can go ahead and post it on the county's website if we were going too fast through here for folks who are watching on Zoom after the fact. And then, I mean, I'll start with commissioners. Do you have any questions for Catherine?
I don't think I have any now. We've had a couple of conversations and I don't know, what you're thinking is, so.
I don't know that I have any questions. I have, when you look at Gilliam County and where the employers are, most employers are going to want employees on the north end of the county. And here they are again, nobody from the north end participating in the conversation, but I think you can get some waste management employees coming this way, but it's much easier getting them to go the other way. When you involve the employer into it, I think it'd be interesting to find out how they feel about investing in something that's 30 miles south.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you a part of that for the fact that we have they have 2 vans that come here, I think, a day with employees. And we've also always had people from here. And I think if they had free transportation to their job up here, they might rather be up here than go the other way.
Yeah, I disagree with that as well, because like, look at how many commute from Goldendale.
Well, they commute from everywhere.
Yes,
that's
they
not that
do.
they won't do that. It's just,
So why wouldn't we want those people that are commuting from outside of our county to at least have some place to go if there's a
the only
project?
thing I'm saying about it is logically closer to
Yeah,
the
but
job.
like you
the
said,
better.
nobody from the north end is here participating as usual.
Well, you and I are.
So I don't, if this is successful, and hopefully it will be, we can duplicate it in the north end if there's
Sure.
need. I don't know if they have
I mean,
land like we do.
Yes,
I would-
that's part of the
I am
problem
not
too.
saying that we need to move this project north, but
I guess what I'm asking is if we can stay, we know that if we can just stay with what this plan is, because we think it's going to work until they're ready to go, because
Well, I think that's part of it too. You prove that it can be done and how it can be done. And then somebody can get interested. And again, where's the property in Arlington that isn't
it's harder to get.
privately owned?
It's
That's
definitely hard to get.
yeah, and I'm just afraid too that some of them, just because it costs less, it depends on what your environment is also. And I'm not saying that Arlington, they have good schools. They have good schools. But when you're that close to the freeway and your family might want to go to the water park in Boardman, and I mean, that's what we're seeing a lot too, is that end, they do go further. They go further for groceries, they go further for that. If we're housed here, we might actually be able to keep a restaurant open 7 days a week. And
Well, I think-
Derek.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
I mean, I think it's worthwhile because Leah is on here, and obviously, Leah, you're representing our largest employer in this county. And I mean, maybe it might be helpful just to give context of how many folks Waste Management's employing, and if you have a sense of how many are living outside of the county, in terms of right sizing what these developments might look like. Can you give us a sense of like what your employees, how far they're commuting and where they're living?
So there are approximately 200 employees here right now. And I did a little bit of research on it, and it looks like about 52% of them do not live in the county. We do run the buses to Boardman, Hermiston, Condon, Goldendale, the Dalles. So there's a number of employee vans that are running to different areas. And also, just for something to chew on, I have talked to Dave Lowe, who is our DO, and Waste Management owns a significant amount of property out here. As you well know, there's 12 to 14,000 acres. And there's an area where the old Stone Ranch buildings used to sit. And I have talked to Dave about possibly deeding or donating or something, that area there, which is probably close to 100 acres in there that we could figure out. There's water there, there's electricity there, and there's a possibility that Waste Management could come up with land. the next problem with that is the zoning and how that is zoned. It's too far out of the city of Arlington to annex into the city. And I was curious about possibly being able to zone it the way you all did that urban area on the other side of Cottonwood, if that would be an option. But I think that the rezoning would be the next piece. And I'm pretty sure we can figure out how to do it, but it might be a little bit of a hurdle. So I think that Waste Management would be on board with helping with this. I have had those discussions. We have a lot of folks. And I think we need to have those. I think your idea of having a meeting with the employers in the county is a really good idea.
Do you believe Mr. Lowe would come to that type of meeting?
I believe I could get him there.
Oh, good for you.
And Leah, did you hear what Amy was saying about the master lease that she's working on with her development over in Sherman County? I just wondered, I know that there's been some question with the city in terms of how to size potentially. And to me, it seems like if we could get employers raising their hands and saying, yes, I'll sign a lease for 10 units, then that would give the city sort of some, and whoever ends up being the person who's developing this, a little bit more confidence that we're not overbuilding or dramatically underbuilding, trying to meet where the demand is now.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously,
I really couldn't hear Amy very well. She was, I couldn't really hear, but it's a master lease that is signed by the employer for like a certain number of employees, and then kind of guaranteeing that we're going to have people in there.
So what and Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I think I heard you describe it is, in essence, it's sort of like that employer has the first right of refusal. So there's, in Amy's case, there's 4 units. That employer then is signing a master lease saying, I want my employees to be the 4 people. And unless they're unable to come up with those 4, then they sort of have that first right of refusal, I guess. And Amy, what happens if actually I signed one for, say, in the city's case, 10, and I only have 8 employees right now? What happens with any that
So the way that, because we're still in the process of developing this agreement, my understanding is, let's just say, in hypothetical, it's a 12-month lease. And so let's say 2 of the units, they have an employees leasing those 2 units, but they don't have the 3rd unit leased yet, that the company will actually end up paying for that 3rd unit.
Got it.
Can they sublease it?
Yeah, and they can sublease it because the lease agreement will actually be with their employee. And there's such a high in Sherman County, just like there is here. So.
So I guess one thing that and we've talked about with Pioneer CDC and the last 3 buildings 2 buildings at least that have been built in Condon, they've been commercial. From the moment they've opened their doors, they've been undersized. Gilliam County Soil and Water Conservation has outgrown their space. The daycare has outgrown their space. I just don't want to go in at this so small that within the first year, we've outgrown the space.
Yeah, because that's just gonna cost money.
It's just gonna cost a lot more money. So 20 units is kind of it's what they built in Hines. It's kind of a pipe dream. I am confident that we can fill them.
I don't think you have any trouble, and that's not, I wouldn't worry about that one bit.
But I know that it does make some people very uneasy to have that many units that could be available. And so that's why I think it's so important meeting with the employers. And I also think too, is if we can't use them in Gilliam County, it seems like they can't find places for teachers in Fossil. So there's surrounding areas that employees are traveling great distances to.
And this might be a good opportunity. See, Kaylin's on there, and she's definitely, I think, one of the first touch points for people who are looking if they've got a job offer and they're trying to figure out how can I make this work. Kaylin, can you give a sense? I know previously you've said like it's often multiple calls a week that you're getting? Are you still seeing that? Can you give us just even anecdotally kind of what you're seeing in terms of requests at either end or both ends? Because I'm sure you're probably getting them for both.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say just a couple of things. I think that we can identify a few additional employers that could be at the table today. Avangrid, Vestas, Elite Clean Energy, who all have, employees that are staying at hotels, motels, and that are looking for communities. One of my biggest pitches to the renewable energy guys has been, when you hire someone, have them call me. Let's find the right community for these guys to live in, bring their families to, and then it will create, stronger employee morale and retention for these guys. So that's something that we're really trying to work on. In October, we had 14 calls for rentals or possible homes to purchase in the community. This week alone, and we're at Wednesday, I've had 4 phone calls. So the need is there. Unfortunately, it feels like we're missing out on opportunity to potentially keep families here that might need newer, better accommodations, larger homes, and then the opportunity to bring folks into the town. I never say we don't have anything. I always give them contact numbers to our real estate agents, folks that are actively renting properties, and then just, always leave the door open that if you come up empty-handed, please reach back out to us and we'll see what we can do. But I know that there are folks not being able to meet the needs of their housing right now.
So maybe this might be a good jumping off point to kind of go through your punch list of next steps, Catherine. I know that PCDC had mentioned when Rob was speaking that there had been at least some initial discussion about whether PCDC would be interested in maybe being a part of that city's project. You've had a discussion. Where are you guys at on your sort of contemplation of that?
We're contemplating. We've never really had a policy, but we've had kind of an unwritten agreement that we didn't ever want to own anything. We wanted to get things moving and make it happen for others and keep making it happen. And that's worked over the years to a lot of extent, including some experiences, a big part of our early days. But we are still contemplating the possibility of ownership or exactly what our role in this should be. And since CDC is still pretty dependent on Gilliam County funding for our projects, and I do want to point out that we've made that funding work for the county. We have a lot more thinking and discussions to go amongst ourselves and the county. But we're all on the same page. This has to happen. Something like this has to happen.
So I have one question though, and I see Paul Conway's on the phone. Many of the housing developments that they're working on are for veterans and for homeless veterans. I'm curious to know if we have an issue, Paul, in the 3-county area of veterans not being able to find housing. So I'm still on there.
Not that I'm aware of. Periodically, I'll get a call from Biggs Junction where there's a homeless person looking for shelter, and I'll refer them to the Dalles SSVF program for temporary housing. But as far as local veterans that live here needing housing, I'm not aware of any.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I'm a lady of action. So what are our next steps in this discussion?
I'm playing here.
I'd be happy to organize a meeting with the employers for you guys, if that would be helpful.
I think absolutely. And I think the chamber is a good venue to host that. And maybe it would be great, Amy, as you're working on that master lease, having that idea and started socializing it with some of these employers, I think might be beneficial. So if you're able to attend or Zoom in or something, I think that might be helpful, because I think that my concern is making sure that we really are tying, if the county decides to put funds in, I want to make sure that we are housing the people who we need to be housing. And what I mean by that is I don't want us to build a 20 unit and then still have Leah Shannon coming on saying 52% of our people are still not living here. I want to make sure that if we can tie specifically to people who are on Main Street that need these employees to be able to function, that we are housing them and they're still not having to go out of the county. So I like the idea of something like a master lease. I think that, and for the public then can be, I think, assured that the money that if the county invests, those are tying directly to jobs that our employers are creating here. And I like that. To me, that makes a lot of sense. So I will throw that out there as wearing that. So for next steps, it sounds like Helen is raising her hand to convene the business community to talk about demand potentially, and what that, I think, to right size what the city is looking at. In terms of administration, what are our next steps?
Well, I think you guys, Pioneer CDC is having a meeting shortly, next week.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
So if I remember right, I was supposed to get some more.
We will have a meeting at some point in the next couple of weeks.
And you guys were gonna get some more information on developers, and I've got some. I haven't had very good. Okay, and if there's something else, I'll share with Rob what I've got, but I'm having trouble getting through to some of these people, so. Anyway, let me know.
Oh, we're on a deadline.
There you go.
You're put on notice.
Yeah.
I'd like a full report.
Want to be part of this?
Let's see what else is on here.
Real quickly, Liz, when would we like to host this meeting? Do we have a timeline?
Yeah,
folks.
Well, November is really booked.
I mean, I would say if it's December, make it early December. Because the other thing I would say is if the intention is that the county is going to be funding it, then we would need to know by springtime. I'm looking at Nathan as in his role as treasurer, to be able to budget for that accordingly, should the court decide that they want to go. So all of these pieces in terms of figuring out how much it would cost and right sizing and all that kind of stuff really needs to be worked out by springtime if the county is going to be at the table with that amount of money.
So I'm asking Pioneer CDC, when we talked about getting a plan and doing possibly an RFP for a developer, are you thinking about, do you want the employer meeting before the development meeting so they have an idea of the need? Or do you want it, do you guys have a timing?
I think that would make a lot of sense.
Rob's, popped up.
I think that would make a lot of sense to do it that way.
I mean, in the meantime, the RFP can be written.
Right.
And then just to decide after that meeting, how many units you think.
Yeah, we need to connect all the dots. I'm not sure. We just have to know the information you really need.
So you'll let us know what information you do need?
Well, I think we discussed it. Just matter of getting all the pieces together.
Yeah.
More information we have when we need.
Okay. And then I think there's two people, well, Ariel from League of Oregon Cities, if she's still on, might help with an RFP. And then Nate Stice, he had some people that would also help with an RFP also with, and connect with developers. And I thought I sent that information on, and if not, I will.
Happy to help with that, Catherine.
Okay,
Hey, Catherine, I was offering to help with it myself. I don't have anyone else who'll help you, but but I would love to help.
Neil, dig in. Okay, so to recap, Lynn is going to be taking the lead in convening businesses sometime in early December to talk about needs. That information will then be conveyed, and or PCDC will be invited to hear that. So that when they are meeting with the potential developer, they can kind of figure out what a right size would be. PCDC board, do you have a sense on when you might be ready to make a decision? And or does anybody have any ideas of somebody else who could be the administrator if PCDC decides it's not for them and wants to pass? That's the other thing.
You're not going to pass.
Why would you pass?
Yep. Chairperson, but no, I don't have any sense of, I think we can make a decision.
I think so. I mean, we've had these discussions that we do, and it's time we did make a decision.
So is it realistic maybe to put like end of the year as a timeline?
Yeah, I think so.
Kirk was raising his hand too. Did you want to?
Just as an alternative, if they're just fourplexes, individuals could own them, and under similar agreements, like the cities would have it. Amy Coy, you could put stipulations they have to be rented to certain people, like they have to be employed in the county or something like that, or have a master lease with an employer. So if they're just fourplexes, an individual developer can do any number of them, or groups of people. How, I mean, just like normal. So.
Great. Amy, did you have?
Well, but the city owns the land, so you're following through with it, right? And it seems like if we were to put together a specific committee, for example, let's say the PCDC goes through with this, and to put through us, to organize a subcommittee that would, bringing in the experts like Nate and all those different individuals to just have forward and advance the project. It would definitely, seems like, take a lot off of your shoulders, the board.
Doesn't it work better with if the county's going to fund this, that it goes through an entity like Pioneer rather than a bunch of individual developers?
It is a lot cleaner for us.
Right.
I need to chime in here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Okay. I think the hesitancy of the board to really commit to anything right now has a lot more to do with my serious health issues and the concern that this might not be the greatest time to commit to something so important that I may or may not be able to follow through on. So it doesn't mean that the PCDC is not interested in doing it. I think there's just, you need to be aware that I think that's some of the reticence from the board at this particular point. I'm not going to get into what those are, but it's a thing. So maybe that requires some additional personnel through PCDC to just be project manager on this and get it done. But that's one of the biggest problems that the board has been dealing with my situation.
And I like the idea. I mean, I think that context is helpful, but I think the other thing is it's a heavy lift. This is not like a simple thing that we're trying to do. There's a reason that when we talk to Nate about this, he doesn't have a community that he can pluck out and say, call whoever, they've done exactly what you're talking about. We're kind of, I think, going into uncharted territory a little bit. And so while I appreciate Rob, I mean, I think this would be Herculean for anybody in any position. So I like Amy's sort of suggestion that if PCDC decides that it would like to go forward, but it's a capacity issue in terms of seeing it through to completion, that we look at maybe partnering and doing a work group. And frankly, I mean, as one of the three that would look at funding it, to me, if part of the funds need to be, okay, we need a project manager and we need to fund that to make sure it is done and done in a way that meets our obligations for public money being invested and all that, to me, that's money well spent in the end. This is, I don't know how you do all of the other things that we're talking about at the court in terms of economic development if you don't have places for people to live. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, the whole idea of having a project manager, which convenes all of these entities together, and this is what we need is, you know, I think that's a very important piece of this, is like Rob's mentioned.
Well, and just know it's not that I don't think it's a great project and very much needed, but I also need to be straightforward and real and not, you know, say I'm going to get involved in this and then 6 months down the road, you know, I'm back in the hospital or whatever it might be. It's too important, I think. And I agree with Liz that if the county is going to invest, you know, millions of dollars in this project, having a competent project manager involved with it would be, you know, obviously really important.
I think too, is what we learned from talking, when Rob and I talked to one developer, is they would do, I mean, obviously you have to pay them, but if Pioneer CDC got a developer, it would take 90% of the work off of Rob's shoulders.
Yeah.
So
Rob already has a full-time job, so.
Yeah, so I think once the RFP, and then if they decide on an RFP for a developer and actually hire the developer and make sure the money is there to pay the developer, it should move forward.
Okay, so I feel like we've got some next steps. One question I had on the development of the RFP, who is doing that? So Teresa can capture it in the notes and I can follow up and say, hey, where are we on this? Is that something that PCDC is taking the lead on? Or is that something that the city is starting and then handing off? Or what are what's the plan for the RFP?
Didn't we discuss a co-op on that one, Catherine?
Co-op, I think we were going to help get information.
Okay.
And it was going to be issued by you guys. It can't be issued from us.
All right.
That's correct. And this was just last week that, you know, we were getting to start this, but I took a helicopter out of here Thursday and spent the night in Richland and was back in the ER all day yesterday in the Dalles with other issues. And it's not that I don't think this is important, but again, my issues are potentially life-threatening. So
how about to take the stress off of Rob? I help get together an RFP with whoever wants to work on it from Pioneer CDC and get some information from all the people that have so kindly offered us, League of Oregon Cities, Housing, and those people, and get RFP written for a developer.
Before you totally.
Hey, Catherine, I'm happy to help take a first draft of that for you.
Well, do it. That's better. I'm looking at Pioneer CDC in the room. Oh, Nate's saying no. Nathan's saying no, not Nate.
This is sounding better all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's
Go for
part
it.
of our
Please
hesitancy.
please thank the governor for her contributions
Yeah.
to
Yeah, I'm
the.
trying to take all the credit for our hesitancy, but really this is outside of anything we've ever done. We've just approved loans and people. This is really a big step for our group. So I think that's part of our
Hesitance.
hesitance is just, you know, we don't want to mess it up for everybody else.
So if you guys meet in 2 weeks, why don't Nate Stice and I get together, and Nate, you're gonna take a first stab at the first draft at one, and then we can get it to Pioneer CDC for your next meeting to look at and see if you're okay with it, to see how you want to move forward with it.
That would be helpful.
Hey, Catherine, I'll just need, I think, some information on the property. And I'm going to need to look at a different, I'm basically going to be stealing from a couple of the other RFP examples that have been out there. In particular, I'm going to be stealing from the city of Hood River to think about how we describe the property for developers. And looking to my friends from the League of Oregon Cities to send me any other examples so I don't make a complete fool of myself.
And I'm looking at my one counselor in the room too, and making sure that, you know, on board to how we're going to, like, how the land's going to change hands. Yeah. I'm just looking to say we need to remember to talk about that briefly this evening. Yeah. So, okay.
Okay, so it sounds like we have an initial game plan. Just to recap, so Teresa's got it for the minutes. Kaylin, you're doing business roundtable in early December to talk about need. PCDC board, you guys are going to be working through your due diligence to see if you want to be administrators and get us an answer back by the end of the year. Catherine's going to be working with Nate Stice and Ariel at League of Oregon Cities to do an initial draft of the RFP and get that over to the PCDC board to take a look at as part of their due diligence. How do we feel about that?
I'm good.
Feels like we're moving forward.
Okay, and then I think once we get sort of once we figure out from PCDC's perspective, if you're willing to take it on and it's a capacity issue, maybe we'll have you come back and talk to the court about what that might look like and whether we need to talk about putting some seed money from economic development in to at least start the capacity to move this forward.
Well, and just know, Judge, that we still have $1 million of the Gilliam County Attainable Housing Funds available as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we were to do that, we would just need to do an amendment to the MOU just to allow that use. But yeah, absolutely. Anything else for the good of the order? How are people feeling about this?
Thumbs up from Matt. That's important.
That's a good thing.
Yes.
Anything that we did not talk about today that people just want to flag as for future conversations we need to begin? Kathy wrote, I feel like you all are awesome. Thanks for that. Kaylin, did you have something?
No, just I think this is really exciting. I think that the communities will feel supported and encouraged by the productivity of the county, the commissioners, the city, and all of the partners involved, as well as the employers feeling supported as well. So bravo to everyone. Great job.
Jeff, I saw you signed on. Did you have something?
Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Is it working out? Yeah. So I know we've talked a lot about the small housing and apartment housing, but and we have the other projects going, but we'd also, I don't want to lose sight maybe in our next discussion about whether there's other incentives we want to have for the more conventional rental housing. We didn't really talk about that a lot today, but you know, I think in some cases, particularly in Condon, there's existing lots that could use utility extensions, and Amy spoke to that a little bit. It's not just water and sewer that needs to go there, but potentially electrical and data that needs to be considered. And whether we need to expand those programs, either raise the loan limits to them or expand the grant programs or the incentives for the rental units. I don't want to just focus on 10 units of apartments. or 20 or whatever it ends up being. I want to focus. I think that that's only going to solve a portion of the problem. And it's not going to solve, there's only going to be a certain percentage of people that are going to be attracted to that type of housing, but we're going to have some of the other ones available as well.
That's a good point.
So I don't know if that's within whether we want to talk about that today or whether we want to, continue on with other discussion.
I mean, I'm certainly open to talking about it now. I don't know. I mean, from my vantage point, I have always believed that the whole point in the end of this is that we have housing. So I've never really viewed this as we have to stick with the original plan. If we need to modify in order to meet the goal, I say do it, but I would be relying really on what you guys are hearing from contractors as barriers to making these investments on their own. I mean, I don't know how the other commissioners feel about it, but that's where I am.
That was my point in my presentation about the assessed value of some of these properties are preventing builders from being interested in buying them. When it's to them, it's not worth anything. It's a cost to get rid of it. And there's really no value there.
So maybe
and those tax dollars would come back a whole lot faster with new construction there.
So maybe on that particular point, Rob, it might be worth having a discussion with Chet and Darlene about what kind of flexibility, if they have any. I mean, Chet may just turn around and say, "No, I'm sorry, I know it's an issue, but I can't do anything better."
The tax collector, the assessed value that the county puts on it has zero to do with the tax value. So their hesitancy to redevelop them has, I don't think it is any, but you'd have to talk to the assessor for 100% on that. I'm just tax collector.
So what I'll do, Rob, is after this, walk down and have a discussion with Chet just to let him know that this came up, and then maybe follow up and see if a secondary meeting needs to be had.
Yeah, just let him know it was a builder that brought it to me and made the point of why they wouldn't want to buy these derelict houses.
Okay.
A lot of them aren't for sale.
So Rob, when you're talking about a builder, we really only have one that's really doing any. I guess that's who we're talking about.
Yeah. But again, it goes back to the fact that they're for sale. The value that they're going off of is going to be the assessed value, and for them, the house is worth nothing. I mean, it's going to have to be torn down. And there goes all their, if they pay $30,000 for nothing, then there goes their profit.
Is there a way that Pioneer CDC, when you have someone tear down a house, that they can't just make it a junkyard after they have the house? And we have one issue in town.
No,
the world has a metal fence around his torn house. I mean, is there a way, I guess what I'm asking is like a condition? Hey,
no, there's conditions. No, they have to either build something on it within 2 years or put the property up for sale. So he's moving right in on the 2 years.
And what happens if they don't?
He has to pay back the dollars that we granted for the demolition with interest, and we even offered him a 36-month loan to pay that off. But no, there are conditions that's part of the grant program.
But they sold it to someone else. So does that condition go with the deed?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, awesome.
So,
well, wait a second. Did it go with the deed, or is it a deed restriction?
Which one are you who sold what to whom?
Well, maybe we need to take that offline.
Well, and I think that comes down to an enforcement issue that, I mean, the city has the same issues. It's like you're going to enforce your zoning ordinances and the county has the same ones too. And it's easier said than done, right?
It's also one that they're not breaking the zoning ordinance.
Well, and there you go. So, but what I wanted to talk about specifically and going back to the housing or in Condon, certainly the derelict housing issue or the empty housing issue. We have a certain amount of money that was provided to the PCDC for loan purposes, and then there was a certain amount that was allocated for grant purposes. So, regardless of what the assessed value is, somebody's going to want to sell that house for a certain amount of money, and there's going to be a cost for demolishing it. Would the court be interested in increasing that value, the grant value, for getting rid of those derelict houses? Would they allow us to allocate some of that money? Right now, I think our grants are limited to, I can't remember what they are, $2,500, $5,000 for demo.
They can go up to 10.
They can go up to 10. But, and that helps offset some of the costs. But if we made that 20, would that make it more attractive to get rid of some of those? And would the court support that? Because I think we would want to have the court's consent if we're going to change our program to go from $10,000 to $20,000 of money that we were going to give away, because that money is not going back to the court.
So is there point, I guess, nothing in the system, we're talking derelict housing. We're talking about collecting taxes on derelict housing. And shouldn't we have a system in place that said it reached that point, it's no longer usable for structure? No longer should be accepting taxes on it too. But, I mean, I know that's an assessor.
That's a check question.
But you see what I'm saying is we're talking about what we're calling derelict housing, and yet we've got property taxes coming in.
So I think we had a discussion, and Kirk had something on ours. Did you about?
Yeah, I mean, we looked into a land value tax where you tax, the city did, where you look at taxing vacant land the same as improved properties. So you're really saying, okay, you can improve your property as much as you want. You don't collect any more taxes on that. So it incentivizes land to be developed as opposed to what we have now, which sort of disincentivizes it. But we can't do that in Oregon because it's in the Constitution. So there's organizations looking to change that, but we're not there yet. So we don't have a lot of flexibility. As I understand, I don't know that much about taxes, but as I understand, we have a limited opportunity to do that. But like Mr. Hammer's saying, it doesn't seem like it makes any difference what it's for. It's just people
If
buying and
anything,
selling
them paying
land.
taxes on it, we want them to tear it down because it would decrease the value and pay less taxes. So if it's derelict, I don't understand why we wouldn't raise it. The cost of raising it is more than the taxes are. But like I said, I'm not the assessor.
Mm-hmm. To Jeff's underlying question, I mean, if this is a barrier to the incentive funds being used to actually build new housing, I'm okay with more of it going out into grants if it's turning into housing stock. So as long as those sort of caveats are in place that are guaranteeing that there's going to be housing stock as a result of the county's investment, I mean, I get what you're saying in terms of that's going to lower the amount that the sort of the revolving amount that, but we make that up on the other side on the taxes if somebody puts a house on it. So at some point, especially for 10, if you're raising from 10 to 20, it doesn't take us very long actually to earn that back. So,
4 years.
And I think we could limit it to builders. Yes, as a builder incentive, it's a separate builder incentive rather than just increasing the demo. That way we know there's going to get something built there.
Well, we might be able to tie it in too with the loan program too, so that, you get this if you do this, and part of it's the demo associated with the lot. And I would also propose the same thing about utility extensions too. I think the big ones in most cases within the city limits of at least Condon and probably Arlington. I don't know if Arlington has these issues, but water and sewer clearly are an issue for certain lots. And I know the city's put a lot of money forward to develop, for example, the baseball field, and we're talking about the north end of town, but there's also some privately held lots that are deficient in utilities. And I think that is one of the things that prevents some of those lots that are available that people own from being developed. So if we could increase that grant amount too and tie it in that way, if the court would be fine with that, that's something we might do that would potentially encourage some of those development of single family homes or duplexes.
The one question I had, I know this has come up in terms of costs, and I think maybe Catherine can speak to this a little bit as well. And maybe Rob, you can fill us in for those utility programs, or because the city has a requirement on sidewalks, correct, for new development? Is that correct?
Subdivisions, there are some curbs and sidewalks.
Okay, so I'm thinking of like the lots that, was it Potter's had? Is that also a potential need, or are you hearing from developers that that's a limitation in terms of being able to develop, you know, say Potter's lots, as an example? I mean, should we be looking beyond just infrastructure and looking to meet, say, sidewalks as well, if there's a requirement?
Well, I think just specifically, he goes, for those lots for those areas that are platted but undeveloped, you know, I've been involved in a couple of those where, you know, that's an overwhelming cost, frankly. I mean, if you have to do the full street, curb, water, sewer development that is oftentimes part of a subdivision development, you know, a couple of years ago, I thought you were in the $700 or $800 a linear foot. And I think you're probably closer to $1,000 a linear foot right now. For those areas that are kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And you know, a block in Condon is typically 300 feet long or 360 feet from center line to center line in the north-south direction, and 260 feet center line to center line in the east-west direction. So that's a pretty overwhelming cost. Just in terms of being able to take the dollars that you have and trying to maximize the effect you have, I think that, you know, trying to redevelop the lots that are within the developed portion of town is probably going to offer you more bang for your buck. But in answer to your question, yes, I think probably those Potter lots, that was a hurdle for those being developed. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn in that, was the fact that, you know, the city has a requirement that you're going to have a, you know, fully developed curb and sidewalk street, fully developed street. And, you know, the price of lots even now won't support that here. And it's more expensive here too. That type of construction in particular is more expensive here than other places. And I think that, you know, the cities up there that's kind of in a partially developed area for the baseball field, I think they're spending in the neighborhood of $400,000. So, you know, that's quite a bit of money to get those lots teed up.
That might be a next wave after we get the low hanging fruit. Am I hearing that?
That's my thought.
Can I ask a question as to something that Rob said?
Absolutely.
Did I understand him to say, if you get the grant money to take down one of these houses, that there's 2 years? And what did you say, Rob, after the 2 years? Did I understand that right? When Catherine was talking about the one lot that came down and nothing was done on it, the house came down.
Rob, could you hear Linda?
Right, after two years, if they've not either put the lot up for sale and or started construction, that they have to pay the demolition fee back.
But if they have sold the lot, they don't have to?
Correct.
Okay.
Because our goal, the goal of the program was to remove this derelict property and now make it saleable. And so this person sold it, and it's got a much better chance of being built on than it did prior to having a derelict building on it.
So again, if I sell that lot, if I own the lot and I use the grant money to take the house down, and I turn around and sell that lot, the next person doesn't have that restriction.
That's correct.
So to me, if we're looking at reshaping these, that to me is a big loophole. Because while I understand the original intent, there still could be a neighbor who says, hey, this is an opportunity for me to have that nice open space that I wanted next to my house. And without passing the restriction along to the next, I mean, it's great that we don't have the derelict house, but we're still not adding to the housing stock or have a guarantee that there's going to be a house built there. So is that something that we maybe, if we're looking at redrafting, we would have to, by the way, for all of this to reopen the MOU between the county and PCDC and do an amendment to authorize this. But I'm wondering if that might be something we need to discuss modifying.
Sure.
So it goes with the property. Thoughts? PC.
I need to have a discussion about our programs, one way or the other, and that sure would be part of it.
Okay.
Well, and I think that one thing with that is, you know, it's one thing for us to have that intent, the mechanism for making that happen that is actually defensible and practical. It probably requires some thought and would, I suspect, would require some input from council. Because I don't think you do a deed restriction with it. I don't think it would be an easement. That there must be some other mechanism for doing that.
So far I'm hearing in terms of things that we might want to revisit.
He left.
An increase potentially in the grant amount for tearing down derelict housing, and then looking at the provision, the requirements on if the land is sold, making sure that that follows the land. Is there anything else that you guys are hearing from potential contractors or developers that seems to be a barrier that maybe a tweak might address in what we're offering?
In regard to Condon, the biggest barriers are location for builders. Where do they put their, where do they put their people if they don't have a place to put them? How much is it going to cost them to pay these people to come down here every day or up here from wherever they are? Materials are more expensive and so on and so forth. That's the number one thing I hear from builders. And Arlington doesn't have, quite the same problem due to its proximity to the freeway.
Amy, go ahead.
So in line with that comment, I mean, I think as they've been building the grade school as well, so this is maybe, I don't know if it's a county question or a city question, but it kind of goes back to, is there a way to approve temporary living in a RV for builders, contractors? I know we sat through that with Rufus, right? That they install like for when builders are coming in during construction period, that the city approves for
We've done that in
contractors.
Arlington too.
Okay, do we have that in Condon?
We don't, but we have 2 RV parks.
And
But we got an RV park that's closed again.
Do you? Well, ours isn't. No, we don't. The one out here, they opened it again. Right?
Jones
Yeah, it's
closed
open.
the other day.
I thought it was open for the contractors down up north.
It was not some
I
of the
heard they shut
story.
down.
Oh,
Because they didn't follow through with us.
I think they
Oh.
turned the water off and shut it down.
so that was the thing all along, is we can try and help them out, but we have 2 RV parks, and I would hope they would work with the county and the Condon RV park to where to park their RVs.
First.
Instead of put it into our system.
Are those ever full or?
Well, right, I should say, when I went by, we were shut it down, and we were trying to make a deal with Avangrid, it didn't happen.
It didn't
But,
happen. They
but that
did not.
doesn't mean you don't have individuals that work for Avangrid that aren't looking for a place to park the trailer. There's 200 to 300 people coming in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
And we could reopen it. It's not.
And to have it closed and not an option is not a good thing at this time.
So we have it, and the main reason we haven't is because there has always been 2 RV parks, and they've worked with like the internet people that have gone through Amy and things like that. So we thought that it was open. So sorry, I did not know that it fell through and it was no longer open.
It could be, it goes back to if we reopened, I don't see what's an issue.
Plus, that's where we get transient tax too. That supports our Chamber of Commerce.
That's a true statement.
Unless they're there for over 30 days and then we're out again. But
Kirk, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just thinking in this conversation with Rufus, they've totally redone their, how they handle RVs. And obviously Rufus is a very specific place. That's not the same as Condon. But one idea that came out of it was allowing RVs on individual lots, which I think is more appropriate there. But one positive that came out of it is that people can buy an individual lot, put their RV there, and they pay to get services there. So it's sort of a baby step into development where it's like, yeah, okay, you don't want a town full of RVs on individual lots, but it also does make that lot more desirable as a developable lot, or it makes it more developable.
During construction, right? They can put the RV during construction.
That's
a temporary.
But you can do it in Rufus now, you can live in an RV on an individual lot and for a full year, and then you can renew it.
In Arlington's similar to that, but
yeah,
basically the stipulation of the RV parks have to be, I think 75% full or 85% or something, and then people can rent space on their domicile with permission of the city.
And then they have to pay city
Yeah,
water.
for utilities and water.
And as my understanding, the 3 RV parks in Arlington, though they may not look full, are all full. They're committed. Every space.
So what's the fix then to the future? I mean, all these contractors that are gonna be there.
They're gonna travel and go elsewhere, and it's gonna hurt the community. I mean, you don't get that.
When we have in Arlington, there are a number of private homes that are using the
Have
park your
RVs.
RV here and pay your utilities to the city.
Could we do that temporarily in Condon during this period of building to allow a situation like that?
if the RV park's full and not open, we can sure have a discussion. I don't think the council would have too much issue with it.
I say we work really hard to keep the RV parks open rather than creating that additional use for the homes. I mean, we work really hard in our town to create this look and this feel, and I think having tons of RVs parked outside of homes isn't really what we're going for here. If we can support the county's Burns Park staying open as well as the Condon RV Park and getting people to utilize those two existing resources.
It's a temporary fix to a temporary problem. It's not long-term.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and just on the record, so folks understand, it's Avangrid's solar project that we were trying to house folks for, and our original intent, which the county court knows, was working directly with the employer, because just opening it up means that anybody that comes in, again, to get back to our original, we want the workforce, we want to actually meet their workforce need. And so originally we were trying to work directly with the employer, and I don't think the employer wanted necessarily to be the middleman on.
We're trying to avoid a landlord-tenant relationship because it's not really something.
Right.
In a legal sense, it becomes a big issue. So.
Especially in a pandemic.
I mean, I'm not afraid to collect the money, don't get me wrong. But
Okay, anything further in terms of the current incentive programs with PCDC that we need to be looking at? Go ahead.
Just the only thing that I can't remember, I've heard it twice, I can't remember who it was from exactly, but just the idea that, and I haven't looked at these that closely, but just the idea that a licensed contractor has to do all of the work. I guess just on the face of it, it all has to go through building codes. So to me, I'm like, who cares? Especially when we have not as many contractors as we wish we did. So I don't know if that's been discussed, but I've just heard that from a couple of people. As a limitation that people that were interested in taking advantage of this saw, but it's not my first.
I think the issue is a lot of people that aren't using them aren't even going through building codes.
I believe that, yeah.
Yeah.
Oops.
So to that point, could the restriction that PCDC's, is there a way, instead of making it tied to a contractor, that it's tied to building permits instead?
Well, yeah, that's what we said. You can do, if you want to paint your, your house, that's fine. If it's something that requires a permit, whether it's, new plumbing, new electrical, roofing, those types of things, we need to know that the licensed contractor is doing the work.
Well, and I would go further with that, for what we're really talking about doing for construction of new houses, that I think is something bigger than an individual should take or normally wants to take on. Now, I know there's some people that want to build their own house, and maybe we would have a discussion about that, but really from my perspective, and I'm speaking for myself on this, I want to have a contractor involved so that you have somebody contractually on the hook to finish the house. And we know that they're going to go through building codes and we're going to do all that stuff right. And that it's going to be built in a time, hopefully in a timely fashion. And so I don't think that's, and I may be wrong, but I don't think that us not directly supporting funding self-performed work is holding up the development of additional housing in Condon. Now, there's some older programs we have around rehab that maybe we could talk about that, but I think for new construction, I can't imagine that that's really a bump that's preventing the houses from being built.
Okay, anything else from folks on this piece? Anything just generally, maybe not related to this. I know way back when building codes was an issue. Hopefully that has been resolved. Rob, have you heard from any contractors that are having issues getting their inspections and permitting through Boardman?
No, I've heard that it's been much improved and the process is working very well.
Awesome. So one barrier eliminated. Hallelujah. Are there any other barriers that are out there that are maybe not financial that we need to be aware of? Zoning issues, things that as particularly the county might have authority over that we need to be aware of and addressing that you guys are hearing? Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Linda.
I think one of the biggest issues that's been touched on here today is the infrastructure of the lots. And it's something that Jeff was talking about. It's just prohibitive when they look at these lots and realize that the sewer is 1.5 blocks away, it's 2 blocks away. And there just doesn't seem to be any type of funding or relief for that to develop these lots.
So too, on that, I just want to make sure that it would be nice if there was a program to help people extend that. But also in the city code, what we put in years ago was a local improvement district and a reimbursement district. So if someone is building a house and they need to get water and sewer to it, and they will take the Potter lots, for example, they can put it in a reimbursement district, and as whoever buys those lots and builds them, they need to reimburse whoever put the utilities in. And the local improvement district is very similar too. So they'll get their money back as they sell lots. One of the things we've come into with the city has been is someone wants to build a house on, and this is another plot of land that they want to buy 17 acres, and they want the city to run the extension of all their utilities for them, but they don't want any neighbors, and they would be the only one for a $500,000 project. Doesn't make any sense for the city of Condon to run it, and knowing that they're never going to sell it once they get that. So you can't put them in a reimbursement district, you can't put them in a local improvement district, and we don't have the money to do that for one person.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't. And I think there's kind of two different scenarios. The thing about a local improvement district, it's a great idea, but if you're talking about having to do a full street development, let's say 360 feet, so $360,000. If you do 110,000 square foot lots, which is effectively what most lots in Condon are, on that street, on both sides, collectively, you're going to get 6 lots out of it. So you divide that out, you've got $60,000 into your street at that point, plus whatever the value of the land was, and then actually getting the utilities to the house. So So you figured out you're looking at $100,000 lots probably to be thinking about making money on that. It's not going to happen. I mean, at least I don't think we're at $100,000 lots yet. We've gone from like $5,000 or $10,000 lots to maybe $20,000 or $30,000 lots, but we're not at $100,000 lots. And that's the cost that I think that we're talking about that. So that's one stumbling block for developing those completely unimproved areas. And then within town, there are a handful of lots, and it's a hodgepodge mix that maybe, I think Linda was speaking to, that maybe needs 100 linear feet of sewer line installed. Well, I mean, that's probably a $10,000, $15,000 extension right there. And oftentimes I don't think there would necessarily be a opportunity for a local improvement district. And even if there was, it's like if there's already development in the area, because there's a sewer line over there that runs through the neighbor's property, and the house next to it's got a sewer line that goes another direction, but you're going to have to put one in the street, which is what you should be doing anyway. You might not have anybody that ties into that, or may not tie onto it forever, but it would improve the city system. And so I think that's the area where there's an opportunity, if we're going to have a grant program to increase that's maybe a grant program in the $10,000 to $30,000 range, is to get that, that new 6 or 8 inch sewer line 100 feet, or put the new 6-inch water line in and put the fire hydrant in so that you can put a water meter within the developed area of town. And make that available to improve, to make some of those lots that are derelict, maybe has a derelict house. Actually, derelict houses are attractive because they almost always have water and sewer to them, and there's not a requirement to put a sidewalk or anything in front of them. So, but that's what I'm thinking of in terms of expanding the grant program, is for those smaller utility extensions.
Okay, so it's Steve, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, really quick. I'm curious. I think the Pioneer CDC program, I mean, there's really great incentives here. I'm wondering if the other side of penalties is something that needs to be explored more, because I think there are a lot of vacant and dilapidated homes. And I don't know, maybe this is what you were kind of touching on, Kirk, but the need for people to sell them, there's no real squeeze on the other side. And I think, I don't know, is a vacancy tax something that's even allowed in Oregon? Or I've heard of like dark windows taxes that exist elsewhere, but I mean, it seems to me like that's the other side of this equation that's just missing. I mean, it's really interesting to me. I don't know, and then Mac has one across from the street from his house, but so many vacant lots, and there's people that there's no real incentive or push for them to get rid of them. And people really love their view lots here and don't want neighbors. I've lived in a lot of places. I haven't been in a place where people are so opposed to having neighbors. It's different for me. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. So I guess penalties, is there a way to penalize people or to tax them for not developing or renting or a property?
As I understand it, no, maybe Nathan knows more. As I understand it, we can't right now, because of the way the Oregon tax code is set up as part of the Constitution. You can't tax. You couldn't have the same tax even for vacant land versus development. For vacant buildings, there may be ways to go about that, like to say like a vacant commercial structure. It's probably
that pressure could be put by enforcing some of the ordinances of the city, which many of these derelict properties are in violation of.
Yeah, we have code enforcement. So, I mean, what people need to understand is one man's derelict house is another man's castle. As much as we don't like to say that, I agree. There are some that are on our dangerous buildings, but Linda can attest. There was a house that someone was ready to move into that there's no way, and thank God someone else bought it, and they're going to get rid of it. And plus it's extremely expensive with attorneys to try and even put someone on a dangerous building list. I mean, we have a dangerous building list, but we haven't put anyone back on it quite some time. So, I mean.
Well, why have the ordinances if you're going to just let them just sit there?
You have to tell me what ordinance they're breaking, Rob. They mow their grass.
They
What
go over.
ordinance are they breaking?
I mean, you've got derelict houses with open doors, open windows, you've got cars sitting on property.
We can get them to go close them, but I mean, there's not that many. And we can get them to get our code enforcement to go out there.
And vehicles, most of the time they take care of the vehicles and that type of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a few places, but, yeah. You would be amazed what people want to buy to live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think putting the penalty phase on another entity is not the way to go.
Okay, so for next steps on this particular piece, I think maybe, is this something that Rob and I could work on? I think our legal counsel would probably take the lead in drafting an amendment to the MOU to maybe address some of these incentive things. So maybe, who's the chair of the PCDC board now?
Yeah.
Jeff, okay. And as luck would have it, he just signed off. So we'll go ahead and volunteer him that Jeff and I can work together with Rob on maybe drafting some potential amendments to bring to the court to discuss with the PCDC board and see if we want to make some modifications, if that sounds agreeable in terms of takeaways for this particular part of the discussion. Sound good? Okay. I feel like this has been a productive meeting. I don't know. I feel like we've got some good takeaways. So does anybody have anything else that they want to at least put on the table or stick a pin in for a next meeting kind of thing? Anybody?
When do you want to come back after Kaylin, like in January?
Yeah, I'm thinking if the PCDC boards and timeline is by the end of the year to make a decision on whether they want to be the administrator, then I'm thinking we look at early January to reconvene and talk about next steps.
Yeah.
Does that sound right? Yeah.
PCDC's next meeting would normally fall November 18th, and it's likely that we'll meet then.
Okay. So it could be sooner.
Hasn't been established for sure, but at least that's.
They won't have the information from
employers.
But I think it would be a good start to go out for an RFP so the developer can look at what's needed. Yeah. So Nate and I'll get that information to you guys.
I would just like my input on the 20, and I know you want to meet with the players first, but with as many calls as Kaylin gets, Jackie and I get a number of calls, Linda gets calls, it just seems like it will be no problem filling 20 homes, in my opinion. And sometimes we have just one individual living in a full house that we're renting that might be interested in some of that, so that a whole family can maybe come into the home to rent. I would think if you were interested in going through with the RFP, that 20 just doesn't seem like it would hardly put a dent into the housing prices we have.
I think too, a lot of the people that are getting by in some of the houses now would free up those 4 people that wanted a bigger house.
Correct.
And also too, to address a derelict. I know one employee for a Main Street employer that's living in a house that I would consider a derelict, and it's been full all the time because there's nowhere else to go. And maybe this person could get into a spot like this that would be better for them.
Well, I know there's people living in travel trailers in people's driveways in Arlington that if there was housing in Condon, they'd probably be interested in that as well. I mean, I don't like to see people leave Arlington, but I also would like to see them have a home and not live in a travel trailer.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we'll look at doing a follow-up discussion probably in January, early January, I think, so we don't lose any momentum The other sort of piece out there that we did not invite them, but we might consider whether we want to loop Columbia Gorge Community College back in if at some point. They have launched a new program as of this fall that might address some of the workforce issues for our contractors. So if you guys are hearing that that is an issue and want to talk more about workforce for our contractors, it would be good to have them at the table, I think, too. So I'm just putting that out there. Anything else for the good of the order for today, though? If not, thank you everyone for your time and raising your hand to take on next steps. And I think this is so exciting that we're moving forward on stuff. So thanks for being here. Thanks for me. And I'll go ahead, it's 4:09 and I'll go ahead and adjourn the work session.